Hello and welcome back to another one of my wonderful Simpsons season reviews. I've done Series 1, I've done Series 2, now on to Series 3. So the overall thoughts on Series 3 in terms of fan base, I couldn't really find much on it. I guess people do like Series 3, but it's one of those seasons that sort of just go under the radar a bit, you know. I think people are more favourable towards, Series 2 and Series 4 than they are Series 3. Series 3 is like the one that just flew under the radar. It exists. So with that in mind, let's go through each individual episode of Series 3. This might be split into two parts, depending on how much space I have on that SD card. I will be getting a new SD card soon, thankfully. But, for the time being, it might just be part 1, and then part 2 might be released maybe a day after, or so, hopefully. I'm trying to my best to try and do part 1 today and part 2 tomorrow. Obviously, when these are being uploaded, and it might be a few days apart, but nonetheless. Obviously it's getting more tricky to do these reviews, especially with university being in the way, and thus I've kind of just got to do these sparingly, but nonetheless, let's try and get through Series 3 of The Simpsons, shall we? Starting off with Episode 1. So, Episode 1 is called Stark-Raving Dad. So, already we're on to quite a controversial episode. Not necessarily because it was controversial when it was released at the time, because it's studying a controversial matter, but rather in terms of modern day, it's quite controversial. It's one of those episodes that I don't believe is aired on TV anymore. And the reason being is Michael Jackson. So, this is a very famous episode. A lot of people love this episode, and it is a good episode overall. I'm not going to dive into the controversy as much, but let's just say because of allegations towards Michael Jackson, this episode is no longer shown on TV. You can still watch it on DVD, but you can't watch it on telly because similar to how they don't play his songs on the radio anymore in the UK, I should say. So, with that said, what's this episode about? Essentially, the episode is about Homer who gets a pink shirt, all because Bart throws his red hat into the washing and his white shirt has been tainted pink. He goes into work one day, which I would like to point out, this is a completely brilliant and hilarious scene. He argues with Marge about, people isolate him because he's already, isolated and no one likes him necessarily, but they'll isolate him even more, they'll, pick on him, and she thinks he's being deluded. Obviously that isn't the case. Mr. Burns on the CCTV monitor sees Homer in a pink shirt, and he basically brings him into interrogation, essentially, about why he's wearing a pink shirt, and they got Marvin Monroe with them to do a psychiatric evaluation of Homer because they think he's insane. He should have been wearing a white shirt, but he's wearing a pink shirt. While this is happening, Bart is told by his sister Lisa that it's going to be her birthday soon, so he has to get her something for her birthday. Oh, pardon me. So, with that in mind, Bart keeps trying to delay and say, "Oh yeah, I will do it." He doesn't. But while this is happening, he's given Homer's psychiatric evaluation form to fill out, and of course Homer's too lazy to do it himself, so he gives it to Bart, and Bart fills out, and Homer's put into a mental institute. So, while at the mental institute, he sees a fat, bold, large man who is called Michael Jackson. He's got the Michael Jackson voice, and of course Homer doesn't know who Michael Jackson is, but he knows his kids love him. So of course he thinks this is the real Michael Jackson, and so Michael Jackson sort of soothes Homer and tries to help him out during this crisis. Meanwhile, Marge has to go to the asylum to free Homer, and they do so successfully in one of the funniest moments in the entire episode. Essentially, Marge mentions Bart's name, and the orderly goes, "Wait, there really is a Bart?" You know, there really is such a thing as a Bart. It's like the reaction and the timing of that joke is just hilarious. So, you know, that's brilliant. So Bart finds out that Homer is with Michael Jackson. Of course, Michael Jackson goes on the phone, and of course he can only hear his voice, he hasn't seen him yet. And Bart believes it, and he calls his friend, and of course his friend then calls other people, and eventually the whole town have come to see Michael Jackson come to the Simpsons household. However, when it does happen, it's not Michael Jackson, everyone's disappointed. But one person is even more disappointed, and that is Lisa. Lisa has just been forgotten about the whole time. Their birthday is here, but everyone has instead fled to, see Michael Jackson. Of course, it wasn't Michael Jackson. And Bart, who's meant to get Lisa a present or something, anything, didn't get her anything. So she is downright disappointed and really not happy with Bart. Not only that, the whole town basically wants Bart's head for lying, although he technically didn't lie. He thought it really was Michael Jackson, it wasn't. So with all that in mind, Bart is now all alone. He is, he basically sent his father to the asylum in the first place, so he was to blame for that. He was to blame for missing out on Lisa's birthday. He was to blame for pretty much everything bad that went on in this episode, and thus Michael Jackson comes over to comfort him. Bart tells him to get bent, and of course Michael Jackson says, you should try and help your sister. You should cheer her up. It is her birthday after all. You should get her something, from the heart. And they do a song together, which is "Lisa, it's your birthday, happy birthday, Lisa." That song. And it's such a heartwarming episode. It's a heartwarming ending. Of course, Michael Jackson then reveals that he's not actually Michael Jackson. He's actually just some guy who used to, sound really angry all the time. But then he started speaking calmly, and everyone loved him. And he goes off on his merry way, never to be seen again. Now, obviously, I'm not going to talk about the controversy. I'm just going to push that aside. This is a very good episode. I can see why a lot of people love this episode. It's a very heartwarming episode. It's certainly the more better episodes of the of Series 3. I can't really think of any real faults with it. It's a genuinely funny episode. The asylum itself, with all the inmates, is hilarious. You have this one guy who can calculate within a second, and then you have Chief, who's been in there for I don't know, 30 odd years. Actually, no, it would be around 30 odd years, maybe 20. Well, between 20 to 30 years, 25 to 30 years, because this was released in the 80s, and if he was in there since the 60s, mid 60s, yeah, it would be around 25, maybe plus years, something like that. Yeah, 25 plus years, and he never speaks a word, and of course Homer says hi to him, and he says hi back, and all the doctors rush over, and he says, well, no one ever, said hi. It's, all the different inmates. It's genuinely a funny episode, but it's also quite a heartwarming episode. Obviously, Lisa, it's your birthday is a really memorable moment in the show. Michael Jackson, who obviously not the real Michael Jackson, is such a likable character. He's up there with Carl from Series 2 in the types of characters from The Simpsons that are one-off characters but are so memorable, so lovable that everyone admires those sort of characters, not characters that are seen time and time again in that sort of sense. So yeah, it's Yeah, it's really, it really is a good episode. Yeah, it's probably a 10 out of 10 episode, to be fair. There's not really anything wrong with it. It's a genuinely lovable, heartwarming, funny episode. It's everything that the classic Simpsons really were, wrapped in one. And it didn't even need to force a celebrity to be in it. So, episode 2 is Lisa Goes to Washington. Or Mr. Lisa Goes to Washington. Don't know why it's called Mr. Lisa Goes to Washington, but hey, Lisa Goes to Washington is probably one of my personal favourites from this series, and probably one of my favourites overall. So that should give you a clue of my personal opinion on this. It is a Lisa-centred episode, although it doesn't actually start off being Lisa-centred. It actually starts off being centred around Homer. Homer reads this magazine about basically how to live life, essentially. It's one of those Lifetime magazines, and each starts trying to change his lifestyle up, and it affects not just him, but it also affects his family for the good. And everything's actually going quite well. There's a competition to write a speech about the democracy and politics and all that in America. And of course, Lisa enters that competition. She writes it all by herself, and of course, at first, the people think that, oh, it's obviously her father who wrote it, and of course, they go to Homer to test him, and he's thick as shit, so of course they realise, yeah, actually it was Lisa. So she goes off to Washington with the family for basically a free trip to write a good old speech about the brilliance of America, how freedom and democracy and blah blah blah, politics, blah blah blah. She's met with this, I believe it's a senator, I might be incorrect there, a politician who, you know, he acts all friendly to her, and of course she's more of him, and of course, in reality, he's just gonna betray her. He's gonna do something that's absolutely horrendous and awful, but, you know, on the outside, he's a friendly, happy, loving man. And of course, it's demonstrated so perfectly in this one little scene where Moe is in his tavern with Barney behind him, and he sees the news, and of course he says, "Oh, what a lovable person that guy is. You know, he really is, you know, for the people." And of course, reality is, behind the scenes, he wants to demolish Springfield Forest and put a load of, like, I don't remember what it was. He wanted to put something commercial up there instead, and of course he fully agrees with it. And he says it's better than dumping toxic waste in the river again. You know, it's that sort of stuff. Lisa overhears this, and she instantly becomes disillusioned with the politics around her. She realises that these politicians, these American, you know, senators, etc., despite their friendly faces, despite constantly, you know, portraying themselves as positive figures, they're really just dickheads at the end of the day. They don't give a shit about you or anything you do. They are going to betray you no matter what. They're going to treat you like shit no matter what. And Lisa reveals this in a big speech, and while she does it in the speech, they decide to clear up everything, you know, by getting the guy fired, by putting him in jail, and they do this all within like an hour. Just to cover up what they did, because they don't want a young girl being disillusioned with the American system of democracy. And yeah, this is a really good episode. So why do I think this is a really good episode? Have you ever seen modern day young people and politics? Like, I cannot give a shit about politicians or politics at all. I know it is important, but it's important when it comes to, say, election times or deciding something, you know. After that, I don't care. If the result is something that I didn't want, okay, so be it, I don't care. It's going to be the same. And in modern day, an episode like this would be, if it was a modern Simpson episode, they would not do this. They would portray that, you know, liberal politician as a really nice, friendly man, and they would have the evil Republican one there. But no, this guy, he's not even like, they don't do that here. They show that, you know, no matter which side of the spectrum you're on, they don't give a shit about you. And the whole friendly face nature is so telling of modern day. You know, how many times have you heard in the UK, for example, like, oh well, the Labour Party is so wonderful because they do all these wonderful things, or at least that's what the TV tells me. And really, when they get elected in, they not only fucked up the economy beforehand, but they also, just the same as the Tories, they're just the same as the Dems, they're just the same as UKIP, they're all the same. They're just different faces. And I think to myself, it's ridiculous to obsess over politics or politicians in general when all they're going to do is do the same thing the other guy's going to do. It's like, it's somewhat ironic how this episode came out in like the late 80s, early 90s, and it is so relevant to today. It is so relevant to today. And it's a shame, really. It's a shame that such a brilliant episode like this isn't really talked about a lot, because it really is the most modern, classic episode of The Simpsons, and yet you would not get this with modern Simpsons, because, well, the last time I checked, they think the squad in America are good people, and they're just the same as the others. They don't give a shit about you. They're just putting on that friendly face just so they can suck you in. It's like, for fuck's sake. And not only that, they also said and did some very stupid things, which I'm surprised none of them got fired yet. But like, I'm gonna leave politics aside. I don't give a shit about politics. But yeah, I'm glad an episode like this exists. The whole idea that young people are shoehorned into, you know, being political and all that, and yet these politicians who act all friendly and caring about them don't care about them, and their true nature gets exposed. And at the end of the day, if it does get exposed, don't you worry, there'll be cover-ups for sure. You know, it's a tragic episode, but it's also a brilliant episode in that sense. I love this episode. It really is a good episode. I will point out there is this weird error at one point. I'm going to say this right now. Series 3, for whatever reason, has shit tons of animation and audio errors. I don't know why, because Series 2 didn't really have that much. Series 1 did have the jankiness of the animation, but like, of all the classic seasons, Series 3 just has so many errors, and one of the more blinding errors is they're taking a tour around, I believe, the White House, and Barbara Bush is in a bubble bath, and of course they accidentally see her naked, and she like screams, but like she's not really screaming. Her mouth is like doing that as if she's talking. And it's so blindingly obvious, and it's just such a weird mistake that they left in. But then again, Series 3 has shit tons of mistakes. But aside from that, it's a very good episode. It's not necessarily as memorable as the first episode of the series, but it's still one of the better episodes for sure, and certainly an important episode, you know, in terms of moles. So, 9 out of 10. So, episode 3 is called When Flanders Failed. Another really good episode, actually. Series 3 starting off quite good. So, When Flanders Fails, Homer hates Flanders, and his hatred for Flanders is almost unjustified, really, because Flanders does nothing but be friendly. And Homer, you know, his hatred for Flanders is so great that when Flanders says that he's stopped doing his job as I believe he was a surgeon, to open up a new shop at the Springfield Mall called the Leftorium, whereby it's all left-handed stuff for left-handed people, because left-handed people are so discriminated against in most establishments. And of course Homer, he doesn't give a shit about this, and they do like a breaking off the chicken bone. Homer gets the biggest piece, and he wishes for Flanders to fail. So over the course of, I'd argue maybe a week or so, Flanders is establishment, new electoratorium, slowly but surely crumbles. No one goes to it. They go there for, I believe, parking tickets. That's it, and they're for free. No one's buying any of the equipment, and this was a big gamble on Flanders' part because he's left his other job, which provided a lot for the family, to do this. And as a result, Flanders fails. His electoratorium is forced to close down because it made no money. He's basically forced to move out of his house and sleep in his car for a day before going off to his sister's home. Homer, on the other hand, he's witnessing this from his point of view, and at first he's like laughing at the failure. He's embracing the chaos. He's embracing the misfortune of Flanders, and of course, the other family members aren't necessarily happy about this. In particular, Lisa. Meanwhile, Bart, he can give two shits. I mean, I believe this is the episode in which, Bart does karate in this episode. He goes through karate lessons. Actually, he doesn't go to karate lessons because he finds it too boring. And instead, plays a video game and he pretends that he's learning karate. That's That's the side story. Couldn't really care less for the karate side story, to be fair. It doesn't really go anywhere. I mean, it does have quite a funny ending, I guess. That sort of like mole ending, whereby, Bart lying is revealed by him being, forced to fight a bunch of bullies bullying his younger sister while learning karate, but of course he didn't learn karate, and of course he gets beaten up. I couldn't give two shits about the side story. It's not really that important. What's really important is the main story, and Homer, he witnesses this, and he meets a few people along the way, and, they're left-handed. For example, Mr. Burns, he's left-handed. This guy that goes to his door, he was left-handed, and quite a few other people actually were left-handed, even at Moe's pub, and Moe's Tavern, and with that in mind, Homer decides that when things get way too, horrible for Flanders, that he has a change of heart, and he decides he's going to tell these left-handed people to go to the Leftporium to get stuff that will help them. And it's a happy ending. Flanders, he's now a success. Homer redeems himself, and it's a decent episode. Like I said, it's a really, really good episode, but it's also, got some major faults with it in terms of Bart's side plot, which really is pointless, to be fair. That's more comical than anything, but I can care less for it. But overall, it's a decent episode. It really goes to show how Homer has changed over the years. Like, to think that Homer started off as just an angry man, more or less. He wasn't necessarily dumb, he was just angry all the time. To being a character who, did care about his family, but made so many mistakes and tried his best to do whatever it takes to do stuff. And not only that, even when he was selfish, even when he was mean-spirited, he still improved himself. To nowadays, where Homer is just so brain-dead that he never learns, and he is just unlikable in a lot of cases. He's just too dumb. It's kind of tragic when you look at it from an overview of Homer over the years. But nonetheless, this is a good episode, and it really is, it's decent. It's really decent. I think Homer, I like the story arc with Homer, like, growing as a character, going from just a nasty piece of work, who's really selfish and, wishing misfortune onto someone who doesn't really deserve it, to then, witnessing it, enjoying it at first, but then realising it has some severe consequences along the lines, and just doing the right thing. And I think that's really just what makes this such a good episode. But yeah, side plot aside, it's a good episode. It's 7 out of 10. So, Bart the Murderer. Bart the Murderer is... When I first read this title on the DVD cover before I decided to rewatch the episode, I won't lie, initially I thought, is this the episode where Bart shoots a bird and the bird has eggs, but the eggs turns out to be lizards? But no, it's not that one. I genuinely did think that was the episode, but it's not. That's much later on the line. But Bart the Murderer... Now, I will say this. I'm a big fan of gangster movies. I'm a big fan of gangster TV shows. You know, I love The Godfather. I love Goodfellas. Casino's brilliant as well. The Sopranos is one of my favourite TV shows of all time. Peaky Blinders is actually pretty good as well. Yeah, so when it comes to gangster stuff, I'm all for it. So Bart the Murderer is... It starts off with Bart, you know, thinking that he's going to have a fantastic day today. You know, he's going to go to a chocolate factory, he's done all his homework, and he's going to get this prize in the cereal. You know, it's funny, I was thinking the other day about prizes in cereal, and I realised they don't do that anymore, do they? And it's kind of depressing. I remember when they used to do that a lot. It was fun. Made cereal fun. But I'm going back to the topic. But instead, things just get from bad to worse for Bart. First, his father steals the prize because he thinks it's really cool. Secondly, his dog eats his homework. He gets to school after missing the bus, I believe, 20 minutes late. And when he gets to school, the chocolate factory trip is about to begin, and everyone's sprung their permission forms. Bart realises he's left it on his bed. So, Bart is forced to stay behind and basically lick envelopes for Principal Skinner. After a really rotten day, Bart walks in the pouring rain, but he ends up falling down a flight of stairs near where the mob do their dealings, into a mob-led pub. He meets Fat Tony, and Fat Tony and the other mobsters, they bring Bart under the wing and they offer him, an ideal life where he'll be paid a lot if they do his jobs. So Bart does like a Manhattan, which is a cocktail which everyone they all love. He also does racketeering for them. For example, cigarettes. They fill his bedroom up with cigarettes so they can take it out and pay Bart. And Bart's living an ideal life with the gang. However, one day he's forced to stay behind because of his behaviour with Principal Skinner. And this is on a day when Fat Tony is meeting another mob group, and of course he gets humiliated because they should have had Manhattans, but they never got it. Bart comes in really angry, and of course he says that Principal Skinner is to blame, and of course they say, is this Skinner guy giving you trouble? And of course Bart says yes, and they go off to visit Principal Skinner. Bart then finds out a day later that Principal Skinner has gone missing, and he fears that the mob had killed him. So Bart, now fearful of the mob having killed Principal Skinner, he goes a little bit insane because everyone's like making rumors of, oh, Skinner was hit by a car, Skinner, ran away, Skinner was killed by the mob, as Nelson puts it, and of course Bart freaks out completely. So Bart, rushes over. He interrogates Fat Tony over Principal Skinner, but by that point the police come in and arrest all of them. At the trial, Bart, expects that the mob will just be on his side, but instead each mobster blames Bart for being the ringleader, for being the perpetrator, for everything. And just as Bart's about to be sentenced, Principal Skinner comes over and he reveals that, in quite a weird but humorous way, he was in his own little room and he was with his stack of newspapers, and the stack of newspapers fell on top of him, and to keep him preoccupied, he played with a basketball and ate from a can of soup or something like that, beans I guess, that was just nearby, and he eventually freed himself just in time. And with that in mind, everyone goes back to their normal lives. Bart is, the mob try getting Bart back on their side, but of course Bart tells him to get bent because of how they mistreated him at the trial. I really like this episode. It's not necessarily the best like mob sort of episode. I think there are like other ones out there, but like this one is certainly a really enjoyable one. I really love the dynamic of Bart being with the mob. I love how Homer witnesses this, and at first he thinks that Bart is smoking, but then it turns out Bart is, with the mob and making loads of money. Homer's really spoiled for this. Marge isn't. There's even like a Goodfellas-esque scene where Bart wanders in a like fresh suit, and when he's at school he's like dictating all the kids to do stuff, and it's just so great. I love it. I think my only disadvantage is it feels very short. It's not very long. Obviously these aren't very long. They're like 20 minutes max, but like this episode definitely felt short. It felt like it rushed a little bit too much with Bart being with them all. But then again, what else can you do? It's called Bart the Murderer. I like this story of Skinner, although I do think it's a little bit too silly that he got crushed by a bunch of newspapers. That's why he was missing. But nonetheless, it's a decent episode. I really did enjoy it. It's an 8 out of 10. It's not perfect, obviously, but it is definitely an enjoyable episode, and it's a gangster centered episode. What else can you not love? So, Homer Defined. Homer Defined is the 6th episode. It's with a title like that, it is more centered around Homer, obviously, but it is a tale of two characters. Once again, it's Bart and Homer. In Bart's case, which is where the episode pretty much begins, Bart, can't wait for Milhouse's birthday party, and he's got a present for Milhouse, which is a walkie-talkie of Krusty the Clown. And obviously, while he's in the school bus, all the other kids are saying, "Oh wow, your party is great, Milhouse. Your party is great." Bart is a little bit, curious over why they're saying this, and then he gets told it's basically revealed that Milhouse had his birthday party the weekend over the previous weekend, and he later finds out more information that Milhouse's mother doesn't see Bart as a good influence, and as such has barred Milhouse from ever seeing Bart ever again. Bart becomes extremely depressed, and he tries hanging out with Maggie and all that. It doesn't necessarily work out, but eventually Milhouse and Bart become friends again when Marge goes over to Milhouse's mother's home and confronts her about it, and essentially lets the two become friends again. It ends with such a funny moment with Bart bringing out like a toy shotgun. It's such a great moment. But that isn't necessarily the main plot. That is just side story stuff. The main plot is actually about a meltdown that's about to happen. So what happens is Homer is obviously working at the power plant. He's fallen asleep again, but because he's fallen asleep, he's not checking on the safety of the power plant, and a meltdown occurs. This means that the power plant is soon going to blow up and basically kill everyone in town. But Homer, he's trying to think back on his training, and of course he was being lazy and too preoccupied, distracted, and doesn't remember anything. So he randomly guesses which button to press, and then he presses a random button by eeny, meeny, miny, moe, and he saves the entirety of Springfield and the plant. Homer is then treated as a big hero, but Homer already knows that he's not really a hero. He just did it by accident, and of course it stresses him out because everyone sees him as this big hero, including his daughter. And Homer feels like he's a fraud because all he did was do it completely by accident. So he's forced to do a speech about what to do in a stressful situation in the workplace, and thus Homer is then forced once again to deal with another meltdown. This time it's in front of his boss and other individuals in the business, top-ranking individuals, and they see Homer basically doing it all, not necessarily straight away, but doing it in a slowly, but slowly, but dare I say, I don't know how to phrase it. Sort of luck-based sort of way. He manages to save the day again, but it wasn't necessarily through a like really heroic way, but really through a stupid and idiotic way. So Homer, he's no longer seen as a great hero anymore. He's just seen as a doofus who managed to save everyone, and that then becomes a bit of like there's a running gag throughout the episode about dictionary definitions. An idiot, Homer Simpson. A fraud, Homer Simpson, and then of course a Homer, which is a Homer Simpson in which someone does something good or manages to save the day or perform some sort of miracle through stupidity, basically through blind luck. And I think it's a decent episode. It's just one of those episodes which just sort of just exists. It's not a bad episode by any means, but it's certainly just not necessarily that interesting of an episode. It's not really easy to talk about this one because it's not that entertaining. It's not really that interesting. It's 6 out of 10, I guess. Maybe 7 out of 10, around that area. Once again, when I initially saw the title for this, before watching all the episodes, Like Father, Like Clown, I actually did think was the episode where Homer becomes a clown, or Krusty the Clown. It's not. Like Father, Like Clown is in fact about Krusty. It's a somewhat sequel to the season 1 episode where Sideshow Bob frames Krusty for committing a burglary act. God, that went awfully. Robbery at the Quickie Mart. God, that was bad. Nonetheless, in a somewhat sequel to that, Krusty is, told that he should, go over to Bart's house to, have dinner with him. After all, he's the kid that saved Krusty, and that's been delayed so many times, and Krusty is too busy just, pleasuring himself with his own goods to do that. But eventually his assistant gets fed up and forces him to go over to Bart's house. He goes over to Bart's house, and to his surprise, he doesn't have to act like a clown, he can just act normal. And right then and there, at the dinner table, he doesn't do the usual, Christian praise as a Jewish prayer. Don't know what that's called. I'm not really good at religion. But he does like a Jewish prayer, and then turns out that, when talking about fathers and sons and all that, Krusty gets really emotional because he's then thinking about his own father who neglected him. And his father was a rabbi. Krusty's father, was a really high-ranking rabbi, and he basically, he was the person everyone went to, should I have more children? Yes, the more the merrier. Should I, become a doctor or something like that? Yes, help people do this, blah, blah, blah. It's like that sort of stuff. And so the rabbi, he doesn't want his son to ever become a clown or do something like that, something that would degrade his own reputation. Unfortunately, Krusty always wants to be a clown. He wants to entertain people, and thus conflict sort of begins between the father and the son. And it draws a line when Krusty is caught at a stand-up show, and his father just so happens to be attending and finds out that Krusty is the clown entertaining everyone. Of course, he disowns his son. Krusty has been disowned ever since. So Krusty falls into a deep depression. Even on television, he's not really himself anymore, And thus, Bart and Lisa decide, you know what, we're going to make it right for Krusty. We're going to try and get the father and the son back together again. They confront the rabbi, and they try using, verses and all that, and Jewish teachings to try and like say, hey, you should forgive your son for doing this, and of course the rabbi always has the upper hand because he then says his own what he knows and another teaching, and it gets to a point where eventually they do, get him to forgive his son. They eventually get him to go on to the Krusty the Clown show, and on live television they hug, and Krusty says, "This is my father, everyone." Of course, he's finally proud of his son, and it's quite a happy ending. So yeah, overall, it's one of those heartwarming episodes. It's actually quite an entertaining episode. Shit tons of Jewish stereotypes, but like, I love I love the voice of the rabbi character. I don't know why, but his voice is quite humorous and interesting just to listen to. Krusty's character arc with his father, I think, is really, really interesting, to say the very least. And obviously, I like what Bart and Lisa do, and I also like how this connects to a previous episode. Not something that many Simpsons episodes do is have a continuity to continue what happened beforehand to now. Thankfully, this episode certainly does that and proves that there is actually genuine continuity between the two. It does sort of make you wonder whereabouts this episode would be placed on the Simpsons timeline, because arguably this could be placed like soon afterwards. I like to imagine that. There is one flaw I have with this. They tried bigging up this side character, this assistant character, who secretly loves Krusty and at the same time has to do it, wants Krusty to be a better person and all that. And I don't know whether they were intending for her to be a bit more of like a major character in future episodes, but she only appears in this episode and she is so underplayed. Like, she only appears like maybe for the first bit and that's it. And honestly, you can care less for this character. You could have replaced it with Sideshow Mel and you would have got the same result, if that makes sense. So she was kind of a pointless character. But overall, I think this is a really, really good episode. It's quite a heartwarming episode. And yeah, it's a 8 out of 10 for me. So with the success of last season's Treehouse of Horror special, it only makes sense to continue the Treehouse of Horrors. Treehouse of Horror 2! However, like with many sequels, Treehouse of Horror 2 is a bad sequel. And, oh boy, this is one of the weaker Treehouse of Horrors in general, and probably one of my least, like, aside from obviously the modern ones, which do really, really suck, but I digress. This Treehouse of Horror is pretty bad. You can tell that they, didn't expect the Treehouse of Horror special previously to do so well, that when they went for another Halloween special, they sort of thought, okay, what do we do now? And it feels incredibly rushed. And obviously, like before, I'll go through each individual story. So story 1, the Simpsons are on holiday, they get a cursed monkey's hand. But if they hold the hand and wish for something, they can get anything they want. And I mean anything. So, if Homer were to wish for, unlimited supply of donuts, he would get unlimited supply of donuts. If they were to wish for them to be rich, they would be rich and famous, and everyone would know them. If they wish for world peace, and this bit really fucks me off, and I'll get on to why it fucks me off in a minute, then world peace will happen. But with each wish, there is a consequence. You see, by being popular and rich, people will eventually get sick and tired of listening or hearing of The Simpsons. Huh, ironic. That is incredibly ironic to modern day. Simpsons predicted themselves, eh? But I digress. If they wish for world peace, for example, aliens would come and would take over Earth through a brutal regime. This being Kodos and bollocks, I forgot his name. Kodo and Kodos, yeah. think so. But yeah, it's an interesting concept, but it just doesn't really work. For one thing, the wishes they have aren't really that interesting. Like the world peace one and the rich and famous one is an interesting wish, but the other wishes, I can't even remember what the other wishes were. They just weren't that interesting. The ending is pretty much a cop-out, I feel, because Flanders gets a hand, so he gets the 5 wishes, and he wishes everything to be, hunky-dory, and obviously everything goes really well for him. And there's no consequence. And I really like the idea of there being a wish, but there'd also be a consequence as well. So that felt like a real bad cop-out, just to spite, the Simpson family. And there is one particular joke which really, I just hate it so much. I almost turned this episode off and skipped it entirely for this one joke. So, obviously being British, it should be apparent that Matt Groening absolutely hates British people, and even though he says that he doesn't really discriminate against anyone, and that is sort of true, British people are the ones that he just detests. Like, he will belittle us Brits all the time. And it's no wonder that those belittling jokes either come back to bite him in the ass, for example the British humour joke, which I believe a lot of people took offence at and did not like, and was somewhat ironic because it came from a modern Simpson episode, to, jokes about history, and in this particular case the Falklands War. So, if anyone's ever read a history book and isn't American, you know that the Falklands is our territory and has been since the 1800s. Truth be told, the Falklands has always been quite disputed. Like, during the 1700s, the 1800s, loads of countries owned it, but us Brits owned it, and we occupied it for pretty much the longest period in time. We've had it for so long that it's basically our territory now, and it's non-negotiable. But obviously, we know about the Argentinians. The Argentinians at the time were under a socialist dictatorship who basically had a failing economy, and the people were getting restless. So to get the people on their side, they thought they would invade the Falklands Islands, and thus we began the Falklands War, because us Brits, we weren't taking shit for anyone. Now, for those that also read their history books, you'll know that the Americans did not like this idea at all, because they just would have preferred us to just let them have it. But we actually, we're not going to be occupied and just let it happen, So we sent warships over, we kicked the Argy-Bargy's asses quite badly, and even now the Argentina is still bitter about it, and even though they've never actually owned it throughout history, but let's put that aside. And Argentina is still a crappy economy, has still got a crappy economy, I should say. But Americans, obviously, they see things differently. They see things as America first and everyone else second. And Matt Groening, even though he tries to be all liberal and all that, he acts more like a bloody Republican than anything else. And there's a joke where, once Lisa wishes for world peace, there's a joke where we apologise to Argentina about the Falklands War, which is such an American thing to happen, thing to do, to, blame the victim and force the victim to apologise to the oppressor. And, it's up there with the other really bad fuck you Britain joke, whereby the IRA blow up a British pub in one episode, and funnily enough, that's actually censored in this country, that one joke, but it's not censored on the DVDs whatsoever. And of course, everyone celebrates it. Once again, because because obviously Matt Groening being American, he sees things as Americans see things, Us Brits are the bad guys, no matter what. So fuck you. That's all I gotta say. But luckily we do have a second Treehouse of Horror episode to go through, and in this one, this is a reality where Bart has unlimited power. Now, one issue straight away is that it's sort of similar to the previous one in the sense that he can just wish anything he wants, and yeah, it is. So before I was rudely interrupted by a phone, second story is very similar to the first. It's basically another, oh, well, I wish for this and this happens sort of story. Whereas the first Treehouse of Horror at least had diversity with the stories, this one really fucking doesn't. It's just two very similar stories after another. But at least it's not like full-blown movie parodies yet. Okay, so in this one Bart has unlimited powers. He can wish for anything he wants or think of anything, and it happens. So if he wishes his cat to be this weird clown monstrosity with fire breath and a flower tail, he can. If he wishes someone to just disappear just like that, he can. And everyone is forced to, obey Bart's rule. So if he, if they do a history test, and on the history test, Bart gets all the answers wrong. Like he says, your, Bonerland, is this place now, and United States was founded at this date, then history would be changed in that order, because Bart has all the power in the world. Now, I will say this is my favourite of the three stories in this one. And even then it's quite weak, which says a lot. But with Bart's unlimited power, there are consequences. For one thing, he mistreats his father a lot more than anyone else. His father is the one that gets the most abuse, and of course it all comes down to psychology. His father has never really been there for. His father has strangled him multiple times. His father is just an annoying pain in the ass, and thus Bart has to learn to live with his father, and his father has to learn to accept Bart. And of course eventually it does go like that, and it ends with Homer kissing Bart on the cheek, which wakes Bart in real life up, because it's all in their dreams in this scenario, not them in a treehouse telling tales. But nonetheless, yeah, it's quite a short one. It doesn't feel very long, but at the same time, I like the idea of an individual who has all the power in the world. Obviously, it's a reference to the Twilight Zone story. I forgot the kid's name, in which a kid has all these people in his house, always smiling and acting like his family, and constantly watching cartoons and all that, and he can just do whatever he wants with his mind. And this is definitely one of those. It's definitely a parody of that, and it's a very good one at that. I just wish it did a lot more. I wish there was a lot more powers used. It feels a little bit strange that most of it is just them being turned into things, nonsensical things. I really wish they went a little bit more all out for it, but hey, it's decent. It's actually the best one of the three. So the final one is a Frankenstein one. Mr. Burns wants to create the ideal employee, and to do so he wants to dig up a grave and put someone's brain into a robot. And I know, it's quite funny. A big corporate man creating robot-like employees. But I digress. So Burns, he also sees Homer slacking off the job, because this is why he wants to create this perfect employee, and he fires Homer. Homer, obviously, he finds a new job as a graveyard cemetery digger, and he ends up falling asleep on that job as well. So during the night, Waylon Smithers and Mr. Burns, they go grave digging, and they find Homer and they cut open his head and put his brain into a robot. However, the robot acts just like Homer. So they realise they failed, and they quickly put the brain back into Homer, and of course Mr. Burns is crushed by the robot, which results in his head having to be cut off and attached to Homer, which is actually quite a funny sequence. They do sort of replicate this in a much better Treehouse of Horror later on in the line, where they go inside of Mr. Burns' body because Maggie was shrunk down as a pill, and they shrink the Simpsons. Like, there is a much better Treehouse of Horror which does a similar scenario. But holy shit, this episode, this short is so rushed. It's like, you don't really see much of the robot Homer at all. You don't really see much of it at all doing anything. And it's like, they just get rid of it so quickly after creating it. It's like, holy shit, this is such a rushed episode. Like, this is such a rushed short. And I feel like they did most of the time in the first one because they thought they'd have some funny jokes, which they didn't. And then they sort of like, they were in the middle ground on the second one. They did a good job with it, but they sort of like didn't show enough, I guess. And then for this one, they just didn't put any effort into it whatsoever. And the most effort they put in was in the stuff at the end with Mr. Burns' head being attached to Homer, which was a funny gag and I liked. But overall, this is just such a weak Treehouse of Horror episode. This is such a weak Treehouse of Horror, and it's only the second one. Thankfully, it does improve, and I obviously I get my Treehouse of Horrors confused. Is it the third one or is it the fourth one that I really, really like? The one with Dracula. The one with Dracula and the Gremlin. That one's one of the best. But like that one's later on the line. But for now, holy shit, this is a bad start for Treehouse of Horror. You had the first one, which was decent. It provided its pilot, I guess. But aside from that, you don't really have much to, enjoy or explore. It's not necessarily the most ambitious one. Whereas this one is just not ambitious whatsoever. This one is so pathetically bad. Like, this is a 3 out of 10, this episode. It's bad. It's really bad. I swear this episode must be cursed, because this is twice I've had to film this episode, and twice there's been distractions, phone call, and then knocking at the door. Nonetheless, oh, and a sneezing fit. Let's not forget the sneezing fit. Nonetheless, Lisa's pony comes after a dreadful Treehouse of Horror episode, and surprisingly, it's a Lisa-centered episode that's really, really good. And I really love this episode, and I can relate to it a lot. So essentially, Homer, he has to get Lisa at the end of a saxophone, because the one that she's got is like broken and rusty or something. I don't know my musical instruments. And while he does so, he actually goes to the pub instead, and he wastes time in the pub, and he doesn't even arrive in time. And as a result, Lisa, she hates her father, because he has essentially humiliated her in front of all the school children at the school during this big event, this big talent show event. So Homer, he watches some old VHS tapes of Lisa when she was young and realises that he himself is a really shitty father, and that he's never really been there in her life. So he tries to make it up for her. He tries to make her happy. He then decides he's going to do the one thing to make her happy: get her a pony. That's all that she's ever really wanted. And owning a pony and caring for it costs thousands of pounds, or dollars I should say. So Homer now has to do multiple jobs to make sure it's all secure and safe. And thus he works way too hard to make sure that Lisa's happy with a new pony. There's a brilliant scene, by the way, where which replicates Godfather, where the pony's head is in the bed. That was pretty funny. But I digress. So Lisa's pony is, all that she's ever wanted. She loves her father, and of course Homer's really happy that his little girl is happy, but he now has to pay the consequences. He has to work so long and do so much and all this just to pay for this pony. And the reason why I said I relate to this episode is because there's this one particular moment where, he's just got back from working at the Quickie Mart during the night shifts, and now he has to get up to go to, normal work, which is at the power plant. The reason why I say I relate to this is because the one scene where, he gets into his bed, he's about to fall asleep, and then 1 minute later, he has to get up again. It reminds me so much of myself right now, currently in the modern, these days with uni, having to, you get 1 minute of rest and then you have to get up and do this now, and then you have to do this, and it's like, so tiring. But nonetheless, it's a really, really good episode because the way it ends is that Lisa realizes that Homer is putting so much work and effort into just making her happy. And she realizes that if her happiness comes at the expense of his life, essentially, his well-being, his, money and all that, then, it's not worth it. And she sacrifices the pony over to, whoever owns ponies and all that, some horse sanctuary, I guess, and, she learns to love her father as much as possible, that she is, he learns to love her father, no matter what. And this is such a lovely, lovely episode, such a heartwarming episode, and once again, it's an episode that makes you really angry in the sense of, like, what modern Simpsons would do with an episode like this. Like, not only would modern Simpsons, like, make Lisa get upset with Homer over something irrational, as opposed to in this case where she really is genuinely upset over something that is genuinely Homer's fault. Homer was completely the antagonist in this situation. In modern Simpsons, Lisa would probably just get angry with him, sort of just, I don't know, getting her shoe wet or something like that. It's like, it would be something irrational, and Homer would, like, not know what he did wrong, and he would not learn to improve or get his daughter's love. He would just buy her the pony because it would shut her up from being whiny, and there would not be any mole. There wouldn't be any, like, working hard to, there would be working hard, but he'd just be asleep all the time. He wouldn't do anything, and he gets fired from it. It would not work in modern Simpsons. What I'm trying to say before I'm confusing you and myself. Like, modern Simpsons really lost a lot of what made these episodes wonderful. Like, Lisa here is a likeable character, not because, she whines and is, politically liberal and all that. She's not unlikable here. Like, what's wrong with her here is genuinely a problem that was caused by her father. It's not a made-up situation. It's not like Lisa the vegetarian, in which she gets upset because her father just so happens to eat meat, and she doesn't like to eat meat anymore, and she gets upset with that, and she's then rightfully punished for ruining a barbecue. It's not like, that's another good example, it's not like, on a clear day I can't see my sister, that dreadful episode where, Bart pisses her off one day, and then she decides to get a restraining order and proceed to torture Bart the whole episode, and yet she's the one in the right. It's like, this is a case of where Homer has done something wrong, and Lisa, is downright upset about it, but she is willing to forgive him at the end of it. She is, understanding of, like, his, wanting to try his best to make her happy, So another thing about modern Simpsons is that Homer would not bother trying to make his family happy, because he would not give a shit. He'd be too dumb to. He'd make things worse. And in this case, he isn't making things worse, he's making things better, but it's making things worse for himself. And there's always that balance. You got to make people happy, but you also have to make yourself happy. You can't make, one person happy, but make yourself miserable. You have to make yourself happy as well, but you can't make yourself happy and make the other person miserable because that wouldn't work. Yeah, so really, really good episode nonetheless. Brilliant episode, heartwarming episode, 9 out of 10. Actually, you know what, scratch that, 10 out of 10. It really is a really good episode, really wonderful. I will say this though, when I was talking about mistakes, there's a really glaring mistake with Ralph Wiggum in this episode. Like, Ralph has a completely different voice at this one moment, where, Lisa's strutting about with the pony and he just sounds so weird. I know this is the early days and Ralph hasn't really been defined yet, but it's like, holy shit, they didn't get her voice right. Alright, so I had to look there for a second. So this episode is called Saturdays of Thunder, and it's interesting that I have this episode back to back with Lisa's Pony because they're the same episode, except in this case it's not Lisa, it's Bart. But I will say this, there is a slight difference obviously. Bart isn't pissed off with Homer at the beginning at all. It's a case of Homer trying to learn how to be a better father, and he realising he doesn't really get involved with his son that much. He goes to like this father-son facility. It's weird, but like, hey, the Simpsons facility whereby he learns how to be a better father, do father and son activities. Of course, meanwhile, Bart is obsessive with trying to do this soapbox race, and he builds a soapbox to race at the soapbox races at Springfield. So Homer wants to help out. So Homer tries building a soapbox for Bart, and of course there's this crappy little wooden thing that's going to fall apart any second. But Bart races in it anyway because it's a father-son project. So Homer is made out of love and care for his son, while Bart is up against the likes of Nelson, who is like speedy and aggressive and will destroy other races on the track, while Martin has this super high-tech advanced like rocket shaped soapbox, which is the same one that's used in all the games, by the way. Like, I swear, like every single Simpsons video game has Martin's spaceship soapbox, and yet for whatever reason that's the one that's always been given to Bart. Mind you, there is a good reason for it, because Bart ends up using it. You see, Martin gets injured by the end of the first race and forfeits basically. So therefore, Bart uses Martin's soapbox to race on his behalf, I guess. But this means sacrificing the lovingly made one that his father made. And of course, Homer gets quite upset about it. Well, Bart, sort of feels bad because he's now, disowning his father. And of course, his father, Homer then realises that, he is a good father. He did all this for his son. He knows his son's, favourite stuff and activities and heroes and all that. And he, no matter what, cheers his son on. And of course, Bart is inspired by this, and during a race with Nelson Mutz, despite suffering a huge amount of damage across the side, he wins soapbox race and, is the better man at the end. It's unlike Lisa's Pony, which was a lot more heartfelt, this is more entertaining, I guess. And I think that's why this one, is remembered a lot more. It's a good episode, don't get me wrong. I certainly like it, but it's not got the impact that Lisa's Pony has. It's not as lovable as that one, and it seems strange to have it back to back with this one, because you have the more emotional one, but then you have the more entertaining one. I mean, it's a decent episode. It's a 7 out of 10. Maybe slightly overrated by a lot of means, because it's not really that brilliant when you watch it again, but hey, people like it. Now, from one really famous episode to another really famous episode. Flaming Moe's. I think almost everyone knows this episode. I wouldn't lie, I actually thought this episode was in Service 2, but I'm wrong. So Flaming Moe's. Moe's being down, Homer's, tries to cheer him up, and he has a unique drink, a unique cocktail. which, you know, no one else in the world knows about. And of course he shows off to Mo, and Mo is like so, you know, impressed by it, and Mo then ends up duplicating it. He then sells it to other people, and everyone loves it. So Mo then becomes famous for what Homer has created, but Homer is unable to get like the copyright claim on it, and he's, you know, driven to the edge of insanity basically, because Mo is getting all this fame and fortune, and he then starts, you know, pushing Homer aside. You know, Homer, you know, feels betrayed by his own friend, and it gets so bad one, you know, Mo, who, funny enough, gets a girlfriend in this episode, who she starts understanding Homer and realising that, you know, Homer's right. You know, you shouldn't be using your friend's drink as an excuse to, you know, sell a product to the world and then say that you're the owner, that you're the creator. But of course Mo is loving the attention because he's never been given this amount of attention in the past. Homer has just been belittled, everything is going wrong for him, and he goes insane. Like, everything, he has a really bad week, basically, and he starts hearing Mo all over the place, and eventually he loses it. He goes inside the bar, and he reveals the truth to everyone, and obviously, you know, all these rich fat cats and corporations, they hear it as well. They start replicating the flaming Homer, flaming Mo, and voila. Mo is finished for, and Homer is, you know, Homer's unique drink is now all over the place, and in the end they both sort of, you know, sit there and, you know, realise what they've both done, or well, what has happened, and of course Mo sort of learns from his mistake. You know, the girlfriend leaves him because of what he did, and really it's quite a bittersweet episode because Mo, although he does realise he made the mistake, there's no real punishment for him other than he lost everything, and Homer on the other hand never gets anything out of it. And I really do like this episode. I can see why a lot of people really love this episode, why it's such a famous episode. You know, because the dynamic between Mo and Homer is something that you never really explored all that much. You know, they're friends. You know, they see. You know, Mo is a loner, lives in his bar, or owns a bar, I should say. And you know, Homer is. You know, we know Homer because it's called The Simpsons, for God's sake. But like, we never really see them like interact as much as this episode in the past. Like, this is the first time we see each other's dynamic. You know they rely on each other, but you also know that if push comes to shove, one is going to betray the other, and it's quite twisted in that way. It's quite a dark, mean-spirited episode, but it's one of those dark, mean-spirited episodes that hit all the right notes. You know, there's a lot of humour in it. Obviously, you know, I believe this is the episode which not AC/DC. Aerosmith appear in this episode. Miss Edna Krabappel is like a complete whore in this episode. It's quite funny. And, you know, obviously the dynamic between Mo and Homer is the best part, but like, there's also some like brilliance to this episode in the sense that, you know, Mo is basically warned from the very start, like, if he keeps doing this, it's going to fall apart. Everything he has ever done is going to go pear-shaped. You know, everything is going to go from bad to worse in seconds. And what do you know? It does. You know, not only does his girlfriend warn him that, you know, you should probably tell him Homer created it so that he can, you know, take advantage as well. And he says, oh, I'll think about it. And then, of course, he doesn't. Instead, he grows more cocky, grows more arrogant, and eventually it all crumbles because the one person that he's been warned about, the one person that he betrayed, basically gets revenge and ruins him and himself at the same time completely. And it is such a bittersweet, but like, there's a lot of justice in this episode. You know, Homer is right. You know, you see a guy who's being pushed to the edge. You see a guy that everything is going completely wrong for him, and you know, there is that satisfaction of him just demolishing Mo completely at the end. It is a good episode, it really is. I'd say around 8, 9 out of 10 territory. It really is memorable, really is good, it's funny, it's entertaining, it's dark, very, very dark, but it's quite gritty as well, and that's what makes it such a great episode. Don't expect me to pronounce the title of this episode. It's Burns Verkanneth der Kraftwerk. It's German. But so essentially Mr. Burns sells the power plant to a bunch of Germans, a German corporation. And the German corporation is so high on safety and health and safety and all that, that Homer, who is a health and safety expert at the plant, basically gets fired. Well, he doesn't get fired straight away, but he's forced to, take better care, because the stocks of the power plant are rising up and things aren't going well. These German employers force Homer to basically take more precaution around the plant, but of course he fails to do so. They fire him. Homer, without a job, loses money, and of course the family is suffering badly. The money is being depleted, and they're forced to take rations. Marge, for example, her hair splits in half. They're forced to, have like half of this and tiny bits of this, and everything's going from bad to worse. Homer goes to Moe's, and at that point, Mr. Burns, who's enjoying his retirement, essentially, goes off to the pub, which is Moe's Tavern, and he sees his former employees treat him like shit because, Homer yells and belittles Mr. Burns, quite rightfully, mind you, for just being an absolute dick. It's like, he deserves it, and for losing his job and all that. And Mr. Burns, rushes back. He gets the plant back to himself, and the Germans are kicked out. Homer is re-employed again. Everything's fine, and then the end. Now, you may think that's quite rushed. Summary, but if I'm perfectly honest, it's not really that memorable, this episode. It's kind of dull. It's not a bad episode technically, but it's not. I could not remember this episode for what it's worth. It's like, I know I've written down some notes on my little notepad, but it's like, even then it's like, it's not really much, and I just don't remember jack shit. It's like, at least the other episodes have memorable moments. This one just doesn't. It's just there, and yeah, I think that's all I can say. It's there. 4 out of 10. I can't remember this episode. It's not very memorable. It's kind of dull. It's boring. Yeah. So the next and last episode for this video is I Married Marge. It's another prequel episode whereby, they reminisce about the past and they remember how they got here. And for me personally, this is better than The Way We Was, even though The Way We Was is, by many fans and many people, is the superior episode. But for me, this is the better one because I just felt that this one had a lot more heart in it than The Way We Was. The Way We Was is entertaining, sure, but it doesn't really have too much heart in it because Homer acts like a dickhead in that episode, and you can't really like him for the way he acted. But in this one, you do sort of, you love the way Homer behaves in this. So Marge and Homer, they're young, they want to get married, and this comes after Marge is pregnant with Bart. So Homer freaks out, and of course Homer needs to, thinks that the only way is to marry the girl straight away. So they get married, but of course things aren't going so well. Economically, they're at an all-time low, the sisters, Patty and Selma, really belittle Homer and think that he's just a worthless waste of space, you know. And Homer, on the other hand, he absolutely adores Marge, and he really wants to, make it better for her. So he makes the sacrifice of, selling the rings, for example, to make money, but also to, he understands that if he stays with Marge, then Marge is going to be worse off while with him. But if he, is away from Marge, he'll be depressed and unhappy. So he thinks to himself, it's better off if Marge is alone, and that he decides he's going to go off, and he starts working at a fast food restaurant briefly to, survive. Marge, on the other hand, she doesn't like the fact that Homer is doing this for her good, and she rushes off to, be with Homer, and it's just a heartfelt episode. They have like little, I believe it's like, is it onion ring wedding rings when they get married, and it's a sad episode in the sense that you can see how much pain it went through for both Homer and Marge to be together, but like it also shows like no matter what, they still like needed each other. And I think that it does a better job than The Way We Was, whereby Homer, in that episode was a bit of an intolerable asshole. Marge, was, more straight edged, if that makes sense. And it kind of shows in this one, it kind of like fixes the flaws from The Way We Was for me personally, and makes Homer just as likable as Marge, and shows that the two, they have flaws, but they also, try their best to do stuff. They try their best to make each other happy, but at the same time, the whole world is out against them. And I think that's such a wonderful, like, idea. It's a tragic but wonderful and quite sad idea, really.